Hello and welcome back to the Coffee Buzz. I'm glad you're here. This is that small pause in your day. A few minutes to slow down, breathe, and sit with a verse from the Tao Te Ching. No agenda, no rush. Just a few minutes with a cup of your favorite coffee. Verse 7 today, and I have to say, this one has been following me around all week. Not in a haunting way, more like the way a good question follows you. The kind that keeps showing up when you're not thinking about it. In the shower, on a walk, right before you fall asleep. I want to read it to you first, and then we'll sit together with it. The Tao is the infinite eternal. Why is it eternal? It was never born. Thus it can never die. Why is it infinite? It has no desires for itself. Thus it is present for all beings. The master stays behind. That is why she is ahead. She is detached from all things. That is why she is one with them. Because she has let go of herself, she is perfectly fulfilled. Let that breathe for a second. I want to start at the beginning with a question, with the first question and answer. Why is the Tao eternal? Because it was never born. Now, your first instinct might be to file that under ancient metaphysics and just move on. But stay with that for a moment, because I think Lao Tzu is doing something more practical here than it sounds. He's not just making a claim about cosmology. He's pointing at a quality of the Tao that he wants us to recognize. Something that exists outside the cycle of beginning and ending, outside of the whole drama of arrival and loss. And here's what strikes me about that. Everything that we suffer from is, in some way, about beginnings and endings. We grieve what ends. We grasp at what's beginning. We're anxious about what might end before we're ready. We're impatient for things to begin that haven't yet. The whole machinery of our suffering runs on the axis of time, on the gap between where things are and where we want them to be. And the Tao just doesn't participate in that. It predates the question. Here's the second question and answer, and this is the one that just stops me completely. Why is the Tao infinite? Because it has no desires for itself. That connection between having no self-desire and being present for all beings, I keep turning that over. We tend to think of desire as the engine of generosity. I want good things for you. That's what drives me to help. I want the world to be better. That's what motivates action. But Lao Tzu is pointing at something different. He's pointing at the difference between giving that comes from fullness and the giving that comes from an agenda. Think about it in human terms. You've experienced both sides of this. You've been helped by someone who has no stake in how you received it, who just gave what they had and let it go. And you've been helped by someone who needed you to need them, who had their identity wrapped up in being your helper. Both acts look like the same from the outside, but they feel completely different to receive. The first kind of help is clean. It doesn't ask anything of you. It doesn't leave a debt. The Tao, Lao Tzu says, is the first kind, all the way down. It has no desires for itself, so there's nothing in its way. It's just present for everything equally without needing anything back. That's not passivity. That's a kind of freedom that most of us catch only in glimpses, moments where we're so absorbed in something that the self-consciousness drops away. When you're deep in a good conversation and you stop thinking about how you're coming across. When you're playing music and your hands just know what to do. When you're so present with someone in grief that your own awkwardness disappears completely. Those moments, that's a little window into what Lao Tzu is describing. And now we hit the paradox, the thing that sounds like a riddle but isn't. The master stays behind. That is why she is ahead. I've been thinking about this one, and here's where I landed. We tend to think of leadership or wisdom or success as something you have to push your way toward. Get ahead. Stay competitive. Make sure you're seen. Position yourself. Build your brand. Be strategic about where you're standing in the room. And yet, and you know this from experience, the people who actually draw us in, the ones who seem to carry something real, are almost never doing any of that. They're not pushing forward. They're just there, present, unhurried, not needing to be first. There's a specific kind of person I think you've encountered who has a quality. When you meet them, you feel almost immediately like you're the most important person in the room to them. Not because they flatter you, but because they actually are more interested in you than in themselves at that moment. And paradoxically, that quality of putting themselves last is exactly what makes you want to follow them anywhere. The master stays behind. That's why she's ahead. The last lines are where the whole verse lands. Because she has let go of herself, she is perfectly fulfilled. Last episode, we set with verse 6, the Great Mother. And that image of the Tao was something empty yet inexhaustible. If you were here for that one, you might feel this verse picking up right where it left off, because the same paradox is at work. You think letting go of yourself would leave you diminished, emptier in the depleted sense. But Lao Tzu keeps returning to this well, the empty cup that never runs dry, the source that never diminishes because it doesn't hold on, the master who is ahead precisely because she isn't trying to get there. I think what he's pointing to at is this: the self we hold on to so tightly, the one that needs to win, needs to be seen, needs to prove something or stay ahead, that self is exhausting to maintain. It takes everything we have just to keep it running. And in running it, we miss most of the actual experience of being alive. When it loosens, even a little, something comes in. Not loss, something more like ease, presence, a sense of being, as the verse says, perfectly fulfilled, not because everything has worked out, but because you're not fighting the moment anymore. I don't think this is something you achieve. I don't think Lao Tzu is describing a destination. He's describing a direction, a leaning. The master isn't someone who permanently let go of herself. She's someone who keeps returning to that letting go again and again in each moment that asks for it, which means it's available to you in the next 5 minutes, in your very next conversation, whenever you remember to stop trying so hard to be ahead. So here's what I'm sitting with this week, and I'll leave it with you. Where in your life are you trying to get ahead? And what might open up if you stayed behind instead? Not as a strategy, not as a trick to eventually get further ahead, just as a practice, a small, quiet release of the need to be first. Thank you for spending a few quiet minutes here. This has been the Coffee Buzz Podcast. Until next time.